welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host GD, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be previewing the Turkish GP. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, and F1 is back this weekend. Hamilton leads the championship by 2 points, Mercedes by a lot more. But it's going to be interesting, the Turkish GP last year was carnage, but definitely a few changes this year. One change this year. The Turkish GP, whoever manages that circuit has water blasted the asphalt of the circuit to increase grip levels. But we'll see what happens because last year we had rain in Turkey, and that reminds me to check the weather for next weekend at the circuit.
Yeah, I'm doing exactly that. And I think it is showing rain for all 3 days in Istanbul. But Istanbul is a big city, and I mean, if whether there's rain at the circuit or not, we'll have to look into it further. But yeah, but if there is rain, I think it's going to be an exciting Turkish GP once again this year.
Absolutely. There's really not a lot to talk about. It seems like there's been a little bit of silence in the F1 paddock in the last couple of weeks. Yes, there has been some conversation coming out of the two GPs, the penalties and whatnot. But I think there's only there's only 2-3 talking points today, and not a whole lot. I think the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that there's no news over the Alfa Romeo seat, and it's been pretty silent, I would say, since we have had a week between the races. What are your thoughts on it? What does this silence mean to you? What are you expecting? Are you expecting a news soon? What are your thoughts? Have you heard any rumors? What's going on, Vedant? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, I mean, there have been no rumors, there have been no news, no gossips, nothing. And I think, I mean, for me at least, the lack of any rumors and the absolute silence around that seat clearly indicates that, Antonio is going to exit the seat this season. Antonio Giovinazzi is going to vacate the seat for next season, because had he been the first choice for Alfa Romeo, had he been, had the decision been made, it would have been announced. But since there has been no announcement, since I don't think there has been any decision, and to defer that decision for so long with that incumbent is pretty straightforward, an indication that there might be someone else coming in my opinion.
Yeah, but who else? And that has been the million-dollar question so far. Obviously, people have been talking about Oscar Piastri not getting a seat and Guan Yu Zhou being preferred over Oscar Piastri, and I think we alluded to the reasons why Guan Yu Zhou might be an overall better prospect for F1 in general. And had Bernie been had Bernie been in charge of F1, I'm pretty sure he would have talked to Fred Vasseur about getting Guan Yu Zhou into that Alfa Romeo seat. But unfortunately, Bernie's not there anymore, and we don't know what kind of role Liberty Media plays, or what kind of relationship they share with the teams.
Yeah.
Unlike Bernie in the past.
But Fred Vasseur did say that the 30 million sponsorship deal rumor was absolutely just that, a rumor. There was no.
And you're alluding to Guan Yu Zhou bringing in $30 million?
Yeah,
Okay.
the Chinese sponsorship, all that stuff. And I mean, it may or may not be true, but I think Fred Vasseur, his comments indicated that, those 30 million don't really matter to us. We don't want a sponsored driver. We don't want things like that. We need a driver that can perform. And I think if they really want that, I think they should go for Oscar Piastri. And yeah, that's...
And I think people forget, how long Fred Vasseur has been in the sport, and he's been in the sport longer than Toto Wolff or any of those team principals that are currently operating with other teams, really. And you could say that he's probably the most experienced team principal on the grid.
Yeah.
So whatever he does, it'll be a calculated move. But yeah, obviously not much to add there. But let's talk about the second talking point. For the upcoming weekends. Mercedes, there's been a lot of talk about Lewis Hamilton having to take that fourth engine, just like Valtteri Bottas did. I think Valtteri Bottas took his fifth engine in Sochi. Apparently, I was listening to the race podcast, and there were actually issues with. It was not just a tactical move. There were
Yeah.
issues with
Yeah.
the engine that Valtteri used in Monza, which is why Mercedes did not want to risk a DNF or anything during the race, which is why Valtteri had to take that penalty again in Sochi, which worked quite out, which worked out pretty good for him. He finished P5 at the end of the day because of the rain. Uh, but obviously, the bigger question being, when will Lewis Hamilton take a fourth engine? Because we've seen Mercedes engines struggle or have reliability problems, not just within the team, but like with the other teams that Mercedes supply. Aston Martin have had a couple, Williams have had a couple. So the question is, will Lewis Hamilton take that fourth Mercedes engine, and when will he take it?
Yeah, I think Toto Wolff mentioned that, even a single DNF will absolutely ruin that the fight for the title.
Championship challenge.
Yeah, and have keeping that in mind, I think they will take that fourth engine, and they'll definitely take it where they are the weakest, so that the deficit is minimum, and not the deficit, but the damage done is minimum as such. But yeah, it's just a matter of tactic where they do take it.
And if you look ahead, there's not really many more or any more Mercedes specific circuits
Yeah,
in the calendar, right?
exactly.
It's You could argue that's mostly a Red Bullish calendar for the rest of the season, unless we're talking about the last race in Abu Dhabi or in Saudi Arabia, where there's too many unknowns. But I think that'll be a little too late into the season with just 7 races remaining to take a new engine, and they'll probably want to take in the next, let's say, 2 races. If not this one, maybe the next one after the Turkish Grand Prix. But yeah, it seems the general consensus is that Lewis will have to take that engine, unless somehow Max Verstappen has an absolute shit race to say,
Yeah.
and he has a DNF or something, or he runs out of any sort of luck. But yeah, not much to add there really regarding that. But one thing I want to talk about is Sergio Perez. Now, obviously, his performance compared to Valtteri has been not as great. Valtteri has obviously come up with more points throughout the season, but Sergio Perez had a great race at Turkey last year in the wet. Finished P2 with a late move from Charles Leclerc backfiring, allowing Sergio Perez to get that P2 position. But if conditions are similar, hopefully Sergio Perez will come through in the wet. But the expectations are really high, and at the beginning of the season, he said, "Give me 5, 6 races and I'll be back." And we thought that after Barcelona, he did a really good job in the couple races following that. But since the performance has dropped, what are your thoughts on Sergio Perez being with Red Bull for not just the remainder of this season? Obviously, he's there, but next season too. Did Red Bull sign him a little too early?
See, obviously he has had a difficult, last few races. I think I was just checking the stat, and I sent it to you earlier, that Sergio Perez has only scored 16 points in the last 6 races. Now that is after all those factors included, rain and everything other than that. But at the end of the day, Sergio Perez is still struggling with that car, and whatever the factors may be, he is not helping Max Verstappen and Red Bull win that championship. Not, the places he's finishing in is what Alex Albon was finishing in, more or less, right? But having said that, Sergio Perez is a known quantity in Formula One, and signing and extending his contract for next season was almost a no-brainer, because they didn't have anyone else to promote. They were not going to promote Pierre Gasly. They didn't have anyone else to bring in. Obviously, they would have had talks outside, like with other drivers outside the Red Bull family, just like they did with Sergio Perez. But at the end of the day, I think Sergio Perez was the right and the only decision they had, the only choice they had, as we talked earlier. So they may have signed
Yeah, I
him
guess. Yeah.
earlier, and his results may raise up questions, but yeah, that's
Yeah, I guess again, not much to add there. We've had this conversation over and over again, and I just don't want to, keep
yeah,
repeating myself and have you repeat yourself
yeah.
over and over again. But what I really want to talk about and what has been a pain point for F1 fans over the last week has been the fact that Qatar was confirmed for 10 years starting 2023. A lot of skepticism, but we'll also be going to Qatar this year instead of I don't know how many GPs that got cancelled, but probably mainly Australia. So we'll be heading to the Losail circuit in Qatar in a few weekends time. But what are your thoughts? I think fans are correct to say to be skeptical about the fact that F1 has never been to Qatar, and the fact that F1 signed a 10-year contract with them is worrying in a way because we don't know what the racing is like. But I think the conversation is just about keeping the sport sustainable financially, which is why F1 did end up signing Qatar. And I think to add to that conversation, I will also include the question for you, Vedant. Is recently we have heard rumors about Kota's future being in trouble, Kota not being able to provide the money that F1 is asking for in order to race at Kota. So is F1 really securing its long-term future with everything that is happening around the sport, or is it simply focusing on the short-term gains? What are your thoughts on it, Vedant?
I mean, firstly, the circuit at Qatar itself. I mean, yes, for one season to accomplish that benchmark calendar of things like that, I think it's fine. It won't affect the racing. It won't affect the image of Formula One as such. And MotoGP themselves have trouble overtaking at Qatar, and we have seen complaints from the MotoGP fans as well. So Formula One will have a nightmare time racing there. The track is flat. I mean, it's like Barcelona. It's like, sorry, not Barcelona. It's like France or
Abu
Sochi.
Dhabi
Yeah,
or
and
yeah.
it's absolutely flat, and the corners themselves have no character. So I don't know about the racing. It's definitely not going to be pretty exciting. About the future, the 10-year contract. The way Formula One is going, adding more and more races every season, we'll probably have 25 races in 2025. That's half the year. So Formula One, obviously, I mean, we have been complaining about it for a long time now, right? That Formula One is just going to places because of the money, and I don't think it's anything other than that. Yes, quota might be a risk. They might not, extend their contract or whatever, but I think Formula One is thinking less about the fans and about the spectacle that they are creating, but more about the revenue they're bringing in, and that's
Yeah,
wrong.
I mean, obviously, I don't think that is completely true. They're definitely thinking about the sustainability of sport and about the fans, which comes across in the fact, it may not come across in this particular discussion, but it comes across when you talk about, Formula One getting all the teams to agree on a new power unit, which will allow Audi and Porsche to come into the sport, and that is looking more and more likely as we move forward. But regarding the circuits, obviously obviously the rumors around Kota and the conversation around Kota is very discerning because the reason Miami GP took place, or the reason F1 put in so much effort to get another GP in the US, was so that they could have two races there, so that um, so that the viewership in the US would increase. And then there was conversation around, oh, if F1 have a race in Miami, people might not want to go to Kota because Miami is a more exciting place, which is why they decided to go to the US, a few months apart. I think the two races currently on the calendar, on the rumored calendar, if you want to say, on the speculative calendar, are 4 months apart, to
Yeah,
allow fans to
even more, I
to be
think.
excited,
Yeah,
and so that yeah, so that fans attend both races instead of choosing just one out of the two. Um, but where does F1 go if they don't go to quota because of financial reasons? And it could totally be possibly true that the reason quota doesn't want to pay whatever F1 is asking for is because they are hedging their bets against the Miami GP, which is earlier in the year, which might eat into their revenue gains, or their profits for that particular event.
Yeah, I mean, the
And to add to that conversation, MotoGP has complained a lot about the quota surface this weekend. So quota might also be losing MotoGP, even although MotoGP has not addressed those concerns from the riders at all.
yeah, that is very surprising that they haven't addressed it at all. But yeah, coming back to Formula One, I think the fact that the two races are months apart and quota is at the tail end of the season, when the championship fight gets hotter, more exciting, the business end of the season, I think it's a better prospective place for quota to stay and to get in more revenue comparatively. Obviously Miami is a hotspot for tourism and all that stuff, so that aspect is not a competition. But yeah, the places Formula 1 is going, we now have 4 races in the Middle East, and I think things like that definitely make
Fans angry.
huh.
I mean, they definitely made fans angry, and
Yeah,
make much less sense to a fan because if you're talking about revenue, in my opinion, you would have a second race in China. Granted, the fact that we haven't had a race in China in 2 years now because of the COVID-19 situation, but talking about long-term, strategy. Obviously, we are sitting on the outside and we have little to no knowledge about the finances and the way F1 is going about it. But from a fan's perspective, I would imagine a second race in maybe China or like in the East Asian market per se, rather than going to the Middle East over and over again at different times of the year. Obviously, there is a financial aspect to it, and the way to put a positive spin on this conversation would be to say, oh, in order to have those races in the US or wherever, where we're not getting as much, where F1 is not getting as much revenue up front, it is essential to have other races in the Middle East where, the circuits can produce and provide that money to F1 to support the entire series across a whole year and to sustain the sport. But then the conversation gets bigger and more complicated when you talk about budget cuts and the way the teams will have to manage 25 races and how they'll increase the budget, and then it gets very complicated
yeah,
to have a genuine and a very organized conversation around this particular topic when you talk about the future of F1.
yeah, definitely. It's pretty complicated, and I mean, it's not just 2 years, 3 years, or whatnot. The deals that these circuits make are 10 years long usually, and I think Imola is going for a 10-year contract. I think Turkey wants a 10-year contract, and basically, I mean, we haven't had a race in Germany, a regular race in Germany for a while now. We went there last year, but that was just a emergency race as such, right? But on a positive note, I think the Instagram page of the Sepang circuit did post something. I don't remember what it was, but I think I remember that there was commotion on Reddit regarding that. And I mean, if they are bringing Sepang back, that is brilliant. But yeah, I think the solution to having these many racetracks is, and I think we have discussed this before, to have them on a rotational basis. So everyone's
Uh,
happy. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah,
I mean,
it's
obviously, Qatar is not on the calendar for 2022, which goes to show the fact that we will still have a 23 race calendar. But F1 is obviously pushing for more and more races in the years to come, and that's going to stretch resources. But at the same time, if you don't want to, push away your regular F1 fans who've been following the sport for so many years, I think it is important that F1 visits those, I wouldn't say historic circuits, but fan favorite circuits
yeah,
such as Nürburgring or Hockenheim, and go back to Malaysia and all those places because they genuinely bring back some of the best memories for especially our generation and people 20, 30 years older than us for the generation above. And that is something that F1 would want to capitalize on. But definitely question marks over the fact that why obviously there's money in the Middle East, but from like it's like the Losail circuit does not have seats for fans at all. I think the capacity is very low at the Losail circuit for fans. So who's coming out to even watch that race? Is that just a TV spectacle at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I mean, apart from being a TV spectacle, obviously having low seats mean that having lesser seats means that the circuit itself makes a lot less revenue, and I don't know how they are going to be sustainable in that regard. But I think apart from the TV fans and the international audience, having races in traditional racing countries per se, like Italy, obviously we have Monza and Imola now, but Germany, it's important to embrace that history and embrace that tradition, in my opinion, because Formula One, we talk about history a lot, and yes, the future is there and everything like that, but yeah, I think these traditional, these set places where Formula One has been successful should come back, even if Liberty Media have to give them a discount per se.
Yeah, definitely food for thought for all the fans and even F1. I'm sure, Stefano Domenicali and his team will be working hard to figure out how they're going to secure the future of F1. But definitely a huge conversation, and I think we almost need to have a structured debate in order to properly probe all the points and all the aspects regarding this conversation, and that is something maybe we can do in the off season once we have hopefully a new world champion or an eighth time world champion rewriting the history book. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, not much else from my side. Anything else from you, Vedant, before we close out this podcast?
Yeah, nothing more. I think with what the weather channel is showing me, I think Turkey is going to be an interesting race. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton drove the wheels of his car last time out. He literally made the intermediates into slicks. So that's something that that can happen this season, this time around as well, and pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again, and thank you for listening to us. And we'll catch you on the next one. Have a great weekend and enjoy this season as much as you can because it will be one for the history books. Thank you once again.